Today we are going to learn how to multiply fractions. Before we multiply fractions, I want to review simplest form because it will help you today. So on the bottom left, I have 6/8. That's a fraction that's not in simplest form. I need to think of a number that divides into both 6 and 8. And I can divide 6 and 8 by 2. So I'm going to do 6 divided by 2, and I'm going to do 8 divided by 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So 6/8 in simplest form is 3/4. They are both equivalent, they're both equal, but the 3/4 is in simplest form, the 6/8 is not. I know they're equivalent because I divided the numerator and denominator by the exact same number. So on the right, I have 4/12. So I'm going to put it into simplest form. So I need to think of a number that I can divide both 4 and 12 by. And I can divide 4 and 12 by 2, but I can also divide them by 4. I'm going to choose the 4 because it's larger. And so I'm going to do 4 divided by 4, and then 12 divided by 4. So 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 12 divided by 4 is 3. So 4/12 in simplest form is 1/3. Something else I want to go over is that in math, of often means to multiply. I'll show you what I mean. So on the bottom left here, I have a $5 bill. If I have one $5 bill, I have $5. But let's say that I have 3 of them. 3 of them. So there's one $5 bill, there's two $5 bills. Now I have 3 $5 bills. If I have 3 of them, I have $15. So I multiplied. 3 sets of 5 will give you 15. On the right, I have 2 ounces of rice. Let's say I have 4 of them. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. 4 bags of rice. 4 sets of 2 will give you 8 ounces altogether. So I multiplied. So the of means to multiply. So now I have 1/2 of 1/4. And we know that means 1/2 times 1/4 because I just told you that of means to multiply and I showed you how. And so on the right, I have a drawing of 1/4. I want to find 1/2 of the 1/4. So I'm going to take my 1/4 and find half of it. So I'm going to split it in half, and there is my answer, 1/2 of 1/4. Well, how much is that? That is 1/8. So 1/2 of 1/4 is 1/8. It might be easier if I split them all in half so that you can see that there's 8. So this is 1 piece, 2 piece, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8 pieces. So right here is 1/8. So 1/2 of 1/4 is 1/8. Or 1/2 times 1/4 is equivalent to 1/8. So 1/2 of 1/4 is 8. 1/2 times 1/4 is 1/8 because of is the same as multiply. I'm also noticing something else. If I multiply 1 times 1, I get 1. And if I multiply 2 times 4, I get 8. Ooh, look at that. Let's look at another one. I have 1/3 of 1/5. We know that that is 1/3 times 1/5. But I want to find 1/3 of 1/5. So I have a drawing of 1/5, and I'm going to find 1/3 of it. So there we go. I split it up into thirds. So my 1/5, if I divide it up into thirds, if I find 1/3 of 1/5, there's my answer right there, 1/15. And look at that. If I multiply the numerators, 1 times 1, that gives you 1. If I multiply the denominators, 3 times 5, that gives you 15. 1/3 times 1/5 is 1/15. 1/3 of 1/5 is 1/15. And on the next slide, it's going to repeat these steps. The steps to multiplying fractions is to first multiply the numerators, then multiply the denominators, and then simplify if needed. So in the middle here, I have 2/3 times 1/5. I'm going to follow the steps. Multiply the numerators. So 2 times 1 is 2. And 3 times 5 is 15. And I get 2/15. And I want to make sure that I've simplified. And 2/15 is in simplest form. You can't divide 2 and 15 by any whole numbers except for 1. But we know we're not going to do that. We've talked about that. And so we have 2/15. Here's another one. 1/4 times 2/6. I'm going to multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and simplify if needed. So 1 times 2 is 2. And 4 times 6 is 24. 1/4 times 2/6 is 2/24. But that answer is not in simplest form, so I'm going to need to simplify here. So I can divide 2 and 24 by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 24 divided by 2 is 12. And so I've got my final answer here, 1/12. Here's a few more. So I have at the top 4/5 times 1/2. I'm going to multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and simplify if needed. So 4 times 1 is 4. 5 times 2 is 10. And I am going to need to simplify here. I hope you notice too. They're both even. When the numerator and denominator are both even, you know you can divide the numerator and denominator by 2. So I am going to divide 4 divided by 2, 10 divided by 2. And so 4 divided by 2 is 2, 10 divided by 2 is 5, and my answer is 2/5. Now the next one, 2/6 of 3/5. Well, I know that's multiply, so I'm just going to change that of to a multiplication symbol. So now I can multiply. 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 times 5 is 30. So first I multiplied the numerators and did 2 times 3 to get 6. Then I multiplied the denominators. I did 6 times 5 to get 30. And then at the end, I need to simplify if I need to. And I'm looking at that 6/30, and I hope you're noticing that it's not in simplest form. You can divide the numerator and denominator by 2 because they're both even, but it's easier to find the largest number that you can divide them both by, and you can divide the numerator and denominator by 6. So I'm going to divide the numerator and denominator by 6. 6 divided by 6 is 1. 30 divided by 6 is 5. And we got 1/5. Now over here on this slide, I have 1/3 plus 1/2. I just want to remind you how to add fractions so we don't start adding them like we multiply them. So you don't say 1 plus 1 is 2 and 3 plus 2 is 5. That is not how we add fractions. That's how you multiply them, but it's not how you add them. So if I'm going to add 1/3 plus 1/2, what I'm going to do is stack them on top of each other because that's how we did it in class, or it's probably how you did it in 4th grade. So I'm adding 1/3 plus 1/2 here, and I need to make equivalent fractions with the same denominator. So my new denominator is going to be 6. And so 3 times 2 is 6. 1 times 2 is 2. I hope this is looking familiar. And 2 times 3 is 3. And 1 times 3 is 3. So 1/3 is equivalent to 2/6. 1/2 is equivalent to 3/6. Now 2/6 plus 3/6 is 5/6. And so 1/3 plus 1/2 is 5/6. I first stack them on top of each other, like we did in class. Then I made equivalent fractions with the same denominator, like we did in class or like you did in 4th grade, and I added them up. 2/6 plus 3/6 is 5/6, and my answer is in simplest form. Now over here I have 4/5 plus 1/8. So first thing I'm going to do is stack them on top of each other because that's the way that we practice in class. You don't have to stack them on top of each other, but since it's the way that we practice, and probably the way you did in 4th grade, that's what we're going to do. And so now I'm going to make the denominators the same with equivalent fractions. My new denominator is going to be 40, and so 5 times 8 is 40. 4 times 8 is 32. 8 times 5 is 40. 1 times 5 is 5. Hopefully this is looking familiar. And now I have 32/40 plus 5/40, which is 37/40, and that is in simplest form. And so 4/5 plus 1/8 is 37/40. Now I'm going to do 4/5 times 1/8. And so we're going to multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and simplify if needed. I actually think multiplying fractions can be easier than adding and subtracting because you don't need to make the denominators the same. So we don't stack them like we did when we added and subtract them. We can just keep them side by side. So first we multiply the numerators. 4 times 1 is 4. Then we multiply the denominators. 5 times 8 is 40. So I got 4/40. It's not in simplest form. You can divide the numerator and denominator by 4. So 4 divided by 4 is 1. 40 divided by 4 is 10. And we got 1/10. Now let's do some more. So I have 4/6 of 2/5. So I know of is multiply. I'm just going to put a multiplication symbol right over the of, and I'm going to do 4/6 times 2/5. First thing I'm going to do is multiply the numerators, then I'm going to multiply the denominators, and then I'm going to simplify if needed. So now 4 times 2 is 8, 6 times 5 is 30. My answer is 8/30, and I need to double check to see if that's in simplest form, and it's not. You can divide the numerator and denominator by 2. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. 30 divided by 2 is 15. And 4/15 is in simplest form. You can't divide the numerator and denominator by any whole numbers, except for 1, but we've talked about that. So now at the bottom I have 2/5 times 1/3. I'm going to multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, simplify if necessary. So 2 times 1 is 2. 5 times 3 is 15. And that is in simplest form. And so my answer is 2/15. And that is how you multiply fractions. You multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, simplify if necessary. Next week, I'm going to show you a way to simplify before you multiply, but we'll talk more about that next week. So for now, we are going to multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and simplify if necessary. So down here, we did 2 times 1 is 2, 5 times 3 is 15, and then we check to see if we need to simplify, and we don't. 2/15 is in simplest form. Thank you.